We are on Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. On Kuf Beis Amud Aleph, we were talking about the Shita of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, "Chatzer shel Adam is kind of shalem midaita." If someone has something in his rishus, in his chatzer, in his property, it's kind even if he's not aware of it. So Gemara is going to ask on this Shita. Meisve, right in the middle of the block. Meisve. Zevel hayotzim min taner or min kirayim. We said in the Mishnah, well, this is really going to be a brisa, but the first part is the same as the Mishnah, that the zevel, the garbage, the refuse that comes out from different types of ovens, belongs to the seifer, to the renter. He produced it and it belongs to him. This is the new part of the brisa. It's not in the Mishnah. What he collects from the air, and Rashi explains when we talk about collects from the air, that's referring to when a person puts down a bucket to collect from animals that are passing through. They would get the waste and use that as fertilizer. That also harehu shaloi. I think my Gemara is leaning on the laptop and causing it to blink. But so that all that belongs to the person who is renting the property. The sheberefes, what's in a barn, or shebachatzer, what's in the chatzer, shabalabais. It belongs to the balabais. Now we get to the question. We said if you hold like Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, who says the chatzah of a person is kind to him without his knowledge, why are we saying that what comes from the air, meaning when the renter puts out a bucket and it collects the waste? The waste, I mean, this is a little graphic, but the waste comes out of an animal. And before it gets into the bucket, it's in the airspace of the chatzah. The chatzah belongs to the owner, not to the renter. So why isn't the owner kainet or during that period of time when it's in the air before it lands in the bucket? So that's the question of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. According to Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, that the owner of the property can be kainet even without his own knowledge. So why isn't he kainet before it lands in the bucket? It's the avir of the owners. Abaya answers it's hard to understand exactly how this works. They're talking about where the renter takes the bucket and literally places it directly underneath the animal without any airspace. So he gets it. There's no chance for the chatzah to be kainet. Rava says that this din that the avir, the airspace of a chatzah, can be kaina. He says that that's only the case if the object is going to land into the chatzah. But this waste never had a chance to land in the chatzah because there was the bucket that belonged to the renter that was in between. So before it could reach the ground, it was already nikna. It didn't have a kinyan to the owner because it never was intent. It was never destined to land on the ground. It was an intervening bucket, and there's no din of avir shevachatzer is like the chatzer itself. Rava, is this obvious to Rava? Is this clear to Rava that something that's not it's not intended or it's not destined to land, it won't have the din that chatzer is kind of like, but this is the question of Rava. Let me just let Menachem in. There's no, we have empty shuls. We have plenty of shuls here. It's no shortage.
So where are we up to?
We're on Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. We're talking about the dinner of Yosef Bar Chanina. So we want to say that the reason why the chatzah, we're on Kuf Beis, like so Rav Amar Vishain Sefer Lenuach Lav Kamonach. He's explaining the reason why this waste is not nikne by the chatzah is because it's lav kamunach dami. Since it's not, there's a bucket in between that's going to catch it before it hits the ground. Therefore, the owner of the chatzah is not kind of. So, is this clear to Rava that something that's not seifel lenuach is lav kamunach dami? If I mean boy, this is a question. The boy Rava zark arnaki pesach zeh v'yatzav pesach zeh mau. If Ruvain had a chayfetz, and he said, I'm being mafker, and he throws it through, Shimon has a property with the door on each side of it, and he throws it through Shimon's property, through door A, and it goes out door B. And then it lands in the Rosh Hashanah. And Levi is waiting there on the other side. So Reuben was mafker this thing. He threw it through Shimon's property into the Rosh Hashanah, and now Levi wants to take it. Shimon's not home. He doesn't even know that the property passed through his house. So Rava has a question. In this case, do we say that since it was never going to land in Shimon's property, it passed right through his house in the air, it's not considered to have landed there, and therefore the chatzor of Shimon is not going, or it's not considered as if it landed. So the Gemara is saying this is a shaila. Why is our Gemara assuming that because there's a bucket, it's lav kamunach dami? So the Gemara hasam lemifsik v'lemidi. That's not a dimyan. Over there, it's a question because there's nothing physical stopping it from landing. It's just flying through the air. So it's that which it's not going to land is not because something's stopping it. Hacha mifsik kli. Over here, there's a kli in between, and that's the reason why it's going to be lav kamunach dami, according to Rav in either case. So the Bryce had ended off and said, whatever is in a barn or in a chatzar, it belongs to a balabais. Tarti. Why do you need both? If there's a barn in the chatzar, that we don't say that the refes is left for the renter, but rather that also remains in the rishus of the balabais. It's coming to tell you that even though the renter in this case had rented the chatzar, he doesn't get the refes. So we're saying two separate things. First of all, we're saying that if he didn't rent out the chatzar, it still belongs to the maskir, and like we said, the din of chatzeri kind of like. But even if he did rent out the chatzar, doesn't mean he's renting out necessarily the barn in it. Meisvei, another question of Yosef Bar Chanina. Again, Yosef Bar Chanina is the man Amma that we said before. We're on the last narrow line. Yosef Bar Chanina is the one who said this halacha that a chatzar is kinda even without the knowledge of the owner of the chatzar. Yoini shevich v'yoini aliyah. These are different types of pigeons, of birds, that they're semi-domesticated. They return regularly to a coop or attic that a person has, but the birds don't technically belong to him, but they keep coming back to his property. Chayeves b'shiluach. There's a din of shiluach hakan on these birds, as we're going to see in a minute. The pasuk says, I don't have the psukim on the side. You have the pasuk. It says ki yikra.
Don't have them.
You don't have? Pasuk says ki yikra. When you're going to have and it'll happen to be that you'll have a bird come to you. We learned from that ki yikra v'lo problem is zumen. It can't be a bird that is owned. Do you need something? It can't be a bird that's owned. It has to be a bird that is a free bird, so to speak. So it has to be an unowned bird. So if, according to Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina, who says that his rishus is kind of, if a person has this coop and the birds are landing in it, the egg should belong to him, and therefore there shouldn't be a din of shiluch hakan. Zak Gemara, Amaraba beitza b'yitzias ruba hu dechayiv lo b'shiluch. They're saying that this egg did not fully come out of the mother bird. So as soon as it partially came out, there already is a din of shiluch hakan on it. But he's not kind it until it's nafal lechatzeres. So what he's going to do is he's going to chase away the bird, and then he will have a din of shiluch hakan. That which we said is a chi of shiluach is before it falls into his chatzah. Not exactly understanding the practically how this works. Is the egg out or in or out of the mother? It sounds like it's partially in the mother. As long as it's partially in the mother, when you send away the mother, I would assume the egg is going to go with it. I guess it means that he'll send away the mother and then the egg will drop out and then he could take it. If that's the case, if we're talking about before the egg before it came out of the mother, why is it asur mishum gezel? It means we're saying it's mitnei darkei shalom. It shouldn't be. It didn't fall into his chatzar. How is there even darkei shalom? The egg is still in the mother. How could it be gezel if someone else takes it? There was no opportunity for the chatzar to be kind of. It's talking about the mother, that he's going to be kind of the mother with mitnei darkei shalom. You can't take the mother because even though the mother is not the daita of the owner is not on the mother because it keeps on flying away. But mitnei darkei shalom, we don't let someone else take it. Really, you could say that which we say someone else can't take it is going on the egg. So benafik ruba daiti elua. But since most of the egg came out, the owner, even though he has no chatzah to be kind of, but he expects he's going to get it. If someone else is going to take it, it's not going to be darkei shalom. Also list this with Ben since we know that according to Rabbi Yehuda Marav, that he says that one can't take a beya from underneath the mother. The mitzvah of shiluch hakan includes in it that not just that there's a mitzvah to send away the mother, but it's also also to take the eggs while the mother is on it. It could even be after the egg fell into the chutzah. Over here, since it's an isser for the owner of the chatzah to take the egg, as long as the mother's on it, his chatzah can't be kind of. That's the din that Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina says the chatzer is kind of l'shalemi daita. That's only when it's mutter to take it. But since you have a mitzvah of shiluch hakan, which includes an isser to take the egg prior to sending away the mother, so that stops in its tracks Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina's din of chatzer shaladam kind of l'shalemi daita. So call it this same. You matzi zachalei chatzer zachalei kalecha the le matzi zachalei chatzer nami le zachalei. Zak Gemara yach asurus begazel bnei darkei shalom. What does it mean when we end off? We say that there's a mitzvah of shiluch hakan because the egg doesn't belong to anyone. Like we just said, since he's not allowed to take the egg, the chatzer can't be kind of. Why do we say that it's also begazel bnei darkei shalom? Either shalcha, if the mother was already sent to a gazam alyu. At that point, the chatzar is immediately kind of. And if it wasn't sent away, what are we saying that it's gezel b'nei darkei shalom? But he has to send it away. He's not allowed to take the egg. It's usher to take out the lav of shiluch hakan, shalach hazayin. We're talking about a cotton that's coming to take the egg, and he doesn't have the mitzvah of shiluch hakan, and similarly, he won't have the isser of shalach to shalchain. It's like the Gemara cotton badarkei shalom. So then he's saying the cotton has a din that he's not allowed to take it out darkei shalom. Would we enforce it's hard enough to make a din chinuch to teach children about not stealing. We're also going to say that we're only talking over here about a cotton who's stealing, who's taking it. We're saying that darkei shalom, he shouldn't take it, even though it's usher, even though it doesn't belong to the other person. No, of course we're not going to enforce it on the child, but we will tell the father that he should return the egg. Zok the Mishnah. This is again more rules of proper landlord-tenant relationships. Someone who rented a house to his friend for a year. He said it's $1,200 for the year. If it turns out like this year, it was a leap year, so there's two adars. So even though the renter is getting an extra year, his rent is still $1,200. His chadoshim, but if the rent was instead of $1,200 for the year, it was $100 a month. There's an extra month. Then the renter has to pay for an extra month. He pays $100 a month, so an extra adar he pays for that month, another $100. Depends on how the pay was structured. Was it a yearly pay or was it a month? Someone rented a bathhouse from his friend. For 12 zav l'shana midiner zav l'chaydish. And also, they made two provisions. He said it's 12 zav for the year and a dinner zav for the chaydish. Obviously, you're making problems. In that case, since they expressed both ways, they expressed it as a dinar per month, and they first expressed it actually as 12 dinars for the year, and then they expressed it as a dinar for the month. You just say yachleiku on the extra month. Practically, Mara Maisa Lister. We just said that if you do it for a yearly amount, then it's tough luck on the rent on the owner. And if it was rented done as a monthly rent, then the renter has to pay. Now it's saying that yachleiku. We first said this din. Strange that we never said the din, and then we said a ma'isa that wasn't the same. So we're saying no, the din it's as if it already said the din. That if you said both things, where you said first for the year and then per month, then you do yachleiku. Ma'isa nam b'tzipar b'achshach merchat mechaver b'shnei masas. Zuhum l'shana medin izah l'chaydish yibam ma'isa v'eb'shim gamliel v'nei Rabbi Yossi v'amru yachleiku es chaydish eva. They said you should divide. Amar Rav, Yehavi Hasam, had I been there, Havi Yahivna le'kula l'maskeh. He said, I would not have agreed with the disposition that they said in the Mishnah. He's obviously Rav L'Chayr was not being chaylik on the Mishnayos. He was going based on another Tana. He said, I would have said in this case where you first said Lashana and then you said per month, I would have charged per month like the second thing. You would have had Kula Maska, you would have had to pay 13 dinar. My kamash malon twice lashon achron. Is Rav coming to tell you that he holds we go after when someone says two opposing lashonos, we go on the second one and we say that he was chayzer on what he said first. Hamarav chadazimna. Why would Rav have to say this? You already said that in a different context. Damrav huna ami be Rav. Astira. If someone bought something, Reuven bought something from Shimon. And he said, I'm buying it for Astira. Astira is 96 prutas. And then he said, Ma'ah Moi. And then he said, 100 Ma'ah or 100 prutas. The din is Ma'ah Moi. He has to pay 100 prutas. He doesn't pay the Astira, which is 96. He said, Ma'ah Moi Astira. But if he said it the other way around, 100 prutas, and then he said Astira, which is 96, Astira, then he pays 96. So you see that he goes basal lashon twice lashon akron. We take the second lashon. So the Gemara says no, that wouldn't necessarily have proven it. Havamina prusha kama parish. I would have said over there when he says astira ma'amai, or when he says ma'amai astira, he's explaining the first thing. And astira can be made up of prutas that are larger or smaller. So when he says astira, he means that prutas have varying values. He said an astira, but then he said, I mean the astira, the 96 prutas, that is equal to 100 mois, 100 regular prutas. Or if we would have said the other way, moi, 100 moi, first,
Mhm.
that's astira. He's saying that the 100 moi that I'm talking about are smaller prutas that equal up to a regular 96 prutas. So that wouldn't have been told you twice lashon achron. That would have been a specific case where the second lashon is explaining what the first one was. Kamashmalan. That's what we have to say. He says you go after the second. Shmuel says a different din from Rav. He disagrees with Rav. And he explains the Mishnah that we said that the din is yachleiku. I'm sorry. That Rav said, I'm sorry, he's arguing. Rav said, I would have given everything to the maskir. He explains our Mishnah that says that we say yachleiku. He says, Bava we're talking about where this all happened. The house was rented out, let's say at the beginning of El. And then there was a Ibriyar. So middle of Av, which is the 13th month from when the schira started. So 2 weeks the renter had already been in there, and usually you pay at the end of the month. So now the renter already is the moitzim, he already got 2 months of rent. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 weeks of rent of this last month, and then there's another 2 weeks to go. So therefore we say yachleik, because each one of them is a muchzak in half. The renter was muchzak because he already stayed 2 weeks in the property, and the owner is a muchzak in the last 2 weeks because the 2 weeks he hasn't been there yet. So you could tell him you could kick him out. So therefore we say yachleiku, that the renter has to pay that's for the second half of the month, the part that he's not a muchzak. But if it's in the beginning of the month, the masker can kick him out. He's the muchzak. He says we use two lashonos. It's not clear which is right, so therefore I'm the muchzak and I can kick you out. But the other hand, if it was already the end of the month and now the owner comes to ask the renter to pay, the renter could say, "You want to take money from me? Prove that you meant it as a monthly rent as opposed to a yearly rent, since you use both lashonos." Why is Shmuel saying that it remains a suffix, and we don't say like Rav that we go after the second lashon, and it always is going to be a monthly rent, which was the second lashon? But Rav someone says, "I'm selling you a core, which is 30 saw for 30 slayim. So I'm selling you 30 saw core is 30 saw for 30 slayim." The purchaser can back out. Either one of them can back out, actually, until the last saw of the 30 is transferred. Kur b'shloisim saw b'sela. If he says a core of 30 saw, I'm selling kur b'shloisim and saw b'sela. I'm selling a core for 30, and then he says a saw b'sela, each saw, which is the same thing as a core b'shloisim. Each saw I'm selling for a sela. Ani meichelach rishon kana. Each one he's kind of. So over there were two lashonos, right? It's kur b'shloisim and then saw b'sela, and we're saying we're going after the second lashon. So l'chayra Shmuel agrees with Rav that we go bus twice lashon achron. And why is he now saying that it would be yachleiku? Because we don't know which one to go at. So Tamar Hasam time ma'im mishum the toughest. He said over there the reason is because he was typhus. That means the reason over there why we're saying that we're twice lashon achron is only because it's really a suffix, but the person who was making the purchase had already taken. He was taking one saw at a time. So however many saws he took, that's how much he's kind of. So Hachanami Katafis, it's the same thing. That's what Shmuel is passing over here. That whoever had the Hachzaka, that's what he's understanding the Mishnah. It was talking about the middle of the month. So the Seicher has a Chazaka on the first half of the month, and the Masker still has a Chazaka. Nothing was toughest from him from the second half of the month. That's what he's going to understand. Rav Nachman Amar, a third shita, Karka b'cheskes b'alei akayim. He holds no. He holds that we don't care that you made the second lashon of saying that it's going to be per month, a monthly rent. It's always b'cheskes bala. It goes according to the owner, who's the landlord. My kamashmon, tzvayshel shenapim. He's saying, so essentially he's saying that you go after the monthly rent. And he has to, the renter is going to have to pay an extra month. Hainu de Rav. How is that any different than Rav that said we go after the second lashon? But Gemara, no. Afagav the apich meikbach. Rav Nachman holds that that the landlord has the upper hand. It makes no difference whether you first said you have to pay 1 dinar per month, and then he said that you do it by the year, or you did it by the year first and then by the month. It's always going to be the yad of the masker is al yoina, because he's the muhsik and the other person is trying to take from him. Bo minei Rav Yani. Soichar Amar Nasati Umasker Amar Loy Natalti. The Soichar said, I already paid you the rent. And the masker says, I never took it. You never gave it to me. Amila Habi Rai. Who has to bring the Rai? Like the Gemara Amos. Depends. The rent is due at the end of each term, whether it's a yearly term or a monthly term. When the term is up, at that point the renter has to pay. So we learned if it's before the Zman came up, we have a Mishnah saying obviously that then the onus is going to be on the landlord. I'm saying on the renter to prove that he actually gave it. And if it's after the Zaman, then the onus is going to be on the maskir, on the landlord to prove that he did receive it. It's not. A father had a child, and he has a chiyuv of pidyon aben. So the din of pidyon aben is that it comes due in 30 days after the child is born. But the father died within those 30 days. The chazka shaloi nifta. The chazaka is that he was not paid his child. Because it's Taif Zmani. But if the father died after 30 days and it's not clear whether the pigeon was paid, then we would have to assume that there was a pigeon aban made until someone will be able to prove that it wasn't it. I mean, the nafkamina will be whether the child himself, when he gets older, will have a chiyuv to be paid himself. So if the father died before 30, we assume he didn't do it. If it was after 30, we assume he did. So the same thing would apply in our case. The renter, if it's before the time that he was mechuyev to pay, we would assume he didn't pay. If it was after the time, we assume he did. So the biyuma de mashal zmani. The mashal zmani. We're talking about was it on the actual day that it ended. Does a person do it on that last day that it's finished or not? We have a brisa. Sacher bezmana nishba v'noita. A sacher, someone who is paid to work, when the time comes, he makes a shvua and he takes money from his boss, from his employer. Sacher hu the Rabban shvua le. The reason why the sacher, usually a nishba is not noita, the person who is being asked to pay money makes a shvua and he doesn't have to pay. But over here, sacher hu the Rabban shvua le. The worker is the one who makes the shvua to say that he's owed money. Shalabayis tar b'payala. A balabayis could easily forget that he paid. He has a lot of employees, and he doesn't remember who he paid and who he didn't. So we'll force him to make a shvua. He might make a mistake. But generally, he would be the one who would have to make the shvua. Over here, the renter he's the one who's being asked to give money. So he would be mehem b'shvua. Usually, by his cycle, we'd go with the usual rule that the person being asked to pay the money who makes a shvua, and he excuses himself thereby from paying. Amarav Nachman. Hi man, the ogile beisel lechayver le'eser shnin. Someone who rented a house to his friend for 10 years. Because of l'shtar, and he wrote a star that said on it, "I'm renting my house." Reuven says, "I'm renting my house to Shimon for 10 years." For Amalei, nakitas chamish. And then one day Reuven goes to Shimon and he says, "That house that I rented to you for 10 years, you already were there for 5 years." Shnin. And Shimon says, "What are you talking about? I'm only here for 2 years. So I still have 8 years to go." Mehem. Even so, the landlord is believed. Because he's a muhsik. It's his land. Unless the seicher, the renter, the masker, can bring a right. If you're saying this is true, that someone who promised to give someone something, who's owed something. In this case, the landlord is owed his house back. He can demand his house back and say it's dude, you have to give it back to me in 5 years, and you don't have another 8 years to go. Same thing when you lend money. Someone lent 100 zuz with a star, and palga, and he says you paid half, but you still owe half of it. No such thing. A person is not neman if the borrower says I paid half. Is he believed? No, he has to bring a raya. He's certainly at least a moedim mixes. He's going to have to make a shvua. So why are we saying that the owner of the land is believed to say that there's only 5 years left? A star of a borrower that a borrower gives a lender. Now the lender has a star saying that the borrower owes him money. The idea of that star is that the lender can use it to produce it to get his money. Emisa de pare. And had it been if it was true as the borrower claims that he had paid a part of it, the borrower should have said, right on the star, I want you to sign on the star that I paid already 50, right? Whenever you pay a loan, I don't know, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to write a star if you lend someone money. And then if they pay part of it back, you write on the loan that this amount was paid, just like you do when you have someone who works for you, right? Then you give a deposit, so they give you a receipt saying that part of the payment was made. So you should have done the same thing. You provide a receipt. But this star, when a house was rented for 10 years, the star had a different purpose. That which I wrote for you, star. I was just doing it that you should be able to say, look, I've been living on this house, on this land for 3 years. I have a chazak in it and it's mine. So by writing a star, saying that this is only a loan of the property, a 10-year loan, the owner will produce a coil, a star produces a coil, and everyone will know that this chazaka is not a chazaka. Amrav Nachman, Shail Adam b'toivay l'olam. This is interesting. Maybe you could think of a practical way to apply this to reality. A person will rent something for its use. Let's see what Rashi calls Shail Adam b'toivay l'olam, right opposite here. In Ra Adam klila chaveri. If someone saw that his friend has a kli, Amar hashileni b'toivay, let me get all the use out of this kli. Yeah, you can borrow it. That object is borrowed forever. That means Ruvain had a nice baseball bat, and Shimon says, that looks like a great baseball bat. I'd like to borrow it permanently. And Ruvain says, "L'tavit" means permanently, and Ruvain says, "Okay, fine." Is the kozman shu roy lemalacha, as long as it's still in good condition. The high tu v'mashmolei kozman shu toiv, as long as it's good. I feel machziroi, even if Shimon would at some point, Reuven says, I need the bat, I'm playing a game, and Shimon gives the bat back to Reuven. The borrower can go and take it back from the original owner when he needs it. It's a permanent lending. Why don't you just give it to him?
Because he wants access to it as well.
It doesn't sound like he has to give it to him. I think that maybe the reason is because we're also going to say that he gets, if it breaks, then the pieces go back to the original owner. What?
He doesn't have to give it back to him technically?
I don't think so, right? He lent it to him. It's a permanent lending. But how can you? A shell goes on its term, right? If you lend something to someone for 30 days, you can't come and say in 50 days I want it back.
The owner still has
You can ask him if he wants to lend it. He'll lend it to you, but he doesn't have to give it to you. So this is a permanent lending. You think it's very not? It's very ungrateful of the borrower if he doesn't lend it back to the original owner. That may be true, but I don't think he's halachically can be forced to lend it. Anyway, it's just a strange situation, strange type of lending. Amr of Mary Broad Bash Shmuel, who the economy. It has to be a kinyan. It can't be just that he said can I borrow it? And he said yes. They have to make a kinyan since I guess because this is a the Rashi says who the kanimei the bailam. You have to make like a kinyan suda. When as soon as he returns it, if like Shimon says Reuven says I'd like it back. If it was just the Mashiach, that kinyan will be over, and then Shimon can't demand you lent it to me permanently, give it back. He has to make a permanent kinyan where Reuven says formally I'm lending this to you as a permanent lending.
Are you able to make a permanent lending, a permanent kinyan
If that's
your shayla?
If they made up, right? They make a kinyan shayla.
By definition, if it's a shayla.
Well, we've always talked about this, right? We've had these discussions before. If there's a kinyan for a shimer, the gabi, like if they're chayzer,
right.
We had such kinyan. So there are kinyanim. It's not the typical kinyan. It's not the kinyan that we normally talk about, which is a purchase, but there can be a kinyan.
Also, you can have a mufsa in it almost.
Right. Amar Mary Breder Vashi Mahadale Kacha. Like I said before, but when the thing falls apart, it's no longer available for use, then the original owner finally gets back the pieces. He's still the owner. Amarava, Haiman da Amalei Lechabri, Oishlin Mara Lemirpik Bay, Hai Pardisa. Lend me a shovel so that I can dig up this tree. Ravik Bay Hahu Pardisa. Then he could the only thing he could do is use it to dig that tree. Pardisa, if he didn't say Lahai Pardisa, but he just said, I want to borrow the shovel to dig up a tree. Ravik Bay Kol Pardisa the boy. He can take whichever one he wants. But all these will Lashon Yachid. Pardisi, if he said, I want to borrow a shovel to dig up all my trees, Ravik Ba'azar Kol Pardisoid Islay. He can dig up whatever he wants. But if it might take a while, but if it breaks, he has to return the pieces to the original owner. Amar Papa, Haiman do Amle Lechabre, Oishlin Hai Gargusa. Lend me your well. So when you're borrowing a well, it's almost like when you're borrowing milk. You're really borrowing is the water from the well. You don't do anything with the well. You just use it to take water. The nafla, and then that well that he had lent him fell, so you can't get more of it. Loi bani lo. The person, the borrower, cannot say, "Oh, I want the water still, so I'm going to rebuild it." He said, "I'm giving you this well, but this well is no longer existing, so you can't build another one." If he didn't say Har Gargusa, he said Gargusa, I'm lending you a well, the nafla, and then the well that I guess he wanted to use fell. Banila. Then the borrower can rebuild it and take the water because he just said a well. He didn't say specifically this one, so it can mean even a new one. Bei Gargusa, if he said I'm giving you space for a well, Kari v'azal kama Gargusa ibira adem. He can go and dig a bunch of wells until he finds, because he said, "I'm giving you a well," and he didn't say he said the place for a well. So whatever he places, he takes that could be the well. But again, it has to be a kinyan. This is like we said before, where he's kind of latayva. This is a very extensive kinyan. It's an extensive loan where he's telling him, "I'm giving you the space to dig up anywhere my property you want." So he needs to have a kinyan to be able to point it. Someone who rents a house, he leases a house to his friend, and the house fell down. The owner, the landlord, has to rebuild the house if it fell down. If it was a small house, he can't make it big. The renter could say, "Listen, I don't want to have the expense of heating a big house. I don't want to take care of it. I want exactly what I had before." And certainly, he can't rebuild it smaller than the original. If it was one room, you can't make it 2 rooms. He can't reduce the amount of windows. He can't add windows. Unless, of course, if they both agree, if he says, "I want to rebuild it with extra windows," and the guy says, "Okay," then there's not a problem. If he said to him, "I'm renting to you this house," Nafal Azale. If it fell down, then it's gone. This house, the house that he rented, is not there. So he's not. Why is the owner required to replace it? He said, "I'm renting you this house. This house doesn't exist, so I have no more shiba to you." If he said, "I'm renting you a house," why is he restricted to what kind of house? If he just said, "I'm going to make you a house," so it doesn't. He didn't make any restrictions. He didn't point to a specific house to say, "I'm renting you this one." He just said a house. So why is he restricted to the house that he had originally given to him? He wasn't obligated to give that specific house. Where he said that he contracted with him. I'm giving you a house with this amount of rooms and this size. This is its length and this is its width. And he said he gave him an architect's drawing of what he was going to provide him. Then obviously he has to provide what was stipulated if that was part of the contract. He pointed at a house and he said, "I'm renting you like this." As long as he pointed at something and he said, "This is what I'm renting to you," why is it a question? He obviously has to do like that. He's talking about where he's standing on the banks of a river. This house that he pointed at had a beautiful view. When he pointed at the house, he didn't mean to say all the dimensions of the house. What he meant to say is this house is on the banks of the river, has a beautiful view, and that was all he was pointing out. But all the other factors he can do as he pleases if it falls down. No. When he pointed the house, he meant the actual details, the physical details of the house.
What if he has someone want to rebuild it? What if he just was giving back his money? Let's say he rented it for 6 months and then it got destroyed.
He still has to. If we're talking about a case where he obligated himself for something specific, he has to provide that. Okay, take care, Rafal. I see you have to go.
Yeah, got to run. Good Shabbos.
Nachman's willing. I'm going to subject him to one more Amud.
At least one.
Right.
Good.
Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
You also leaving?
In a few minutes, how much longer are you going?
I want to do one more Amud, but should go. It's very quick. It's not hard. That's okay. Yeah, you got a few more minutes, Menachem? Okay. Someone, we've gone through this. A makabel is someone who rents it, who's a sharecropper on a field. He agrees to take it and use it, and during that time, he pays a percentage to the owner. There's different ways of harvesting a field. Some people cut off the plants that are there, and other people uproot them altogether. So, as we're going to see, there's advantages in each way of treating it. And some people also have a minute that they plow it over afterwards, and that causes whatever's left over to be like sort of fertilize the field. Everything goes according to what the minig is. Just like when a makabel makes a deal that a percentage of the produce of the field goes to the landlord. So just the same way you do that with the tvua, with the actual grain, you also have to divide up the different types of straw and hay that's produced. Just like if it was a vineyard, so the produce of that is wine. When they would have a vineyard, they would take off, they would prune it and take off branches. So those branches would be divided again in the same percentage between the owner and the sharecropper. We're going to explain what the kanim is, but eventually we're going to see, as we're going to see, it's the sticks that they would use to support the vines. That's going to be the maskana. And both parties are responsible to contribute these kanim, these sticks that are used to support the grapes. We said there were two ways of harvesting. One was lixer, to cut the let's say if you're talking about wheat, you'd cut off the wheat and leave the root. In other places, they would uproot the entire wheat stalk. And each one you have to do kafi the minig of that place. And both of them, whether it's a place where the minig is to be kaitzer, both the owner and the sharecropper could say, I'm makbid, you should do kafi the minik here. So if it's a makam, ushnei makbin zelzel, liktzer and rishad akar. I'm sorry, what's it called?
Which is beneficial to who?
Both have both a benefit to each one and a demerit for each one.
Each one.
Yeah, we're gonna see.
Okay.
We're gonna see what they are. Hi Amar. So for the first we said, Litzer and Rishai if the minig is to cut it off, then you can't uproot it. Hi Amar Beina, the Titzvan Liara. The owner says, I don't want you to uproot it, because if you uproot it, then everything's going to be gone. If you leave over a little bit, that's going to nourish the land. That part that you leave will nourish the land. And also the tenant could say, I don't want to uproot it. I don't want to go to the effort of uprooting it. That's harder work. So therefore, I don't want to do it. So therefore, each one could be ma'akav on the other one. The other one says, I want to be ma'akar. They have reasons to object. Einer shai liksar, and if the minig is to ma'akar, they can't be kaitzert. Hayam beina detinarker aroy. The owner says, I want my land to be clear. I don't want to have any stubble left on it. So it's better for me if you take off the minig is to ma'akar. I'm makbid that you should ma'akar. Hayam beina tivna. And the other one says, no, I want to leave it. I want to take I want to be ma'akar and get the full value. I'll get the last bits, and I'll use that as hay or something. Ushnei ma'akar zelzel lamali. The Gemara says, so then we have to say, if they both have reasons for it, why are we saying they can both be ma'akav? What is that adding? Ma'atam kama, ma'atam litzah, and rishai lakar, and rishai litzah, mishum d'shnei ma'akar zelzel. It's just an explanation. It's not saying an extra thing. Then we said, lachrosh akrav yichrosh. If the minig is that they plow afterwards, he's obligated to plow. The sharecropper has to plow. Pshita. L'charit pasha. Lo tzricha. Asher deloy menachshi. Va'azol. Iu v'nachash. We're talking about a place. Why is it that we're saying that he's required to plow? It's obvious if that's the minig, he should have to do it to leave it clear for the next guy. We're talking about a place where most people don't prune beforehand. Va'azol iu v'nachash. And he went and he pruned and he took away most of the weeds earlier. The reason why I pruned was that way I took away almost all the weeds. I took away the weeds earlier because I didn't want to have to plow afterwards. But the Gemara says, even so, you can't say that I pruned earlier and therefore I don't have to plow afterwards. Plowing, it's not quite as good as plowing. And if he would have wanted to, he should have gone to the owner and said, listen, I want to prune in advance and not plow at the end. If the owner agreed, then he would do it. But since he didn't, he doesn't have the right to change. Hakol k'minig hamadin. Then we said everything goes with minig hamadin. Hakol usuyamai. What is this coming to add? A place where the minig is to when you would buy, let's say you would rent karka to plant wheat on it. If they normally would also rent the trees that produce fruit, which didn't really need any work, you could just pick it, maskirin. So then that also comes along with the rental. Malkum she'enogul lahaskir ein maskir. Maskirin shita. What is the chiddush of this? Obviously, this is what comes along normally. Just like whatever the minig is in New York when you rent a apartment that comes with the air conditioner, so the guy can't take out the air conditioner. Same thing if it comes with the tree. Why would the owner be able to say, I'm going to keep the fruit of the tree even though I rented the property? Everyone rents for a third, meaning that everyone, they're not rent, we're talking about sharecroppers, and every landlord takes a third as payment. And he gave it to this sharecropper, he gave him a deal. He said, you only have to pay me a quarter. That which I let you pay less, my idea was, even though normally most people rent with the trees, I gave you a little less because I was intending to keep the fruits of the trees for myself and just let you plant the wheat. He can't say it's implicit in the lower price. He has to explain, he has to say directly that he's making a different deal. A place where the minig is not to rent the trees, then the Aris does not get the rights to the fruits of the trees. Pshita, that's l'chayr also pashit. It's the exact opposite. Everyone gets pays a quarter to the landlord. Also, he is paying extra. He's paying a third. The reason I give extra is in order to get the fruit of the tree. He should have made it explicit. We said just like they divide up, the percentage goes to the landlord of the.
Is this an issue
wheat.
that you charge so much money? We don't,
Of all you know,
yeah,
first of all, no, I know karka, you know that.
I didn't know that. I forgot. Right? It's not
Yeah.
another car. Okay.
But also, it's a percentage. I don't know
Big
how
difference.
I don't know how a percentage could be. I know it has to be an amount. He's saying I'm paying.
There's a monetary value, a third versus a quarter. So that's more than a fifth.
Is it?
Yeah,
I'm not doing my math right.
33 versus a quarter.
33 versus a quarter, which is 7%, 8%. 8% out of 25 is more than a fifth.
Cock, I was thinking it's like, well, no,
Yeah, the cock is definitely less. So they also have to divide up the different types of hay. Amar Rav Yosef. Bebabel nihigu yavi tivna la arisa. In Babel, the minig was that they wouldn't. The Aris didn't get to keep the tevin. Why are we telling this? The inish yav an yafahu v'loy gamrina minei. That if someone were to do so, don't change the minig. Why is he telling you what the minig is? Every place has their own minhag. He's coming to tell you, don't, if you see someone doing differently, it's just that they came to a different, he decided to be generous and give the tevin. But it's not that you should think that the minig is different. Amar of Yosef, Buchra v'tachcha v'akafta. These are different levels of the mounds that they would make for fencing around the property. The kani de chazira and the sticks that they use to hold up the thorns that they use for a border. This is all part of the border fence. The balabais. All this is the responsibility of the balabais. This is the minimum needed to provide security that you should be able to protect your land. The chizra gufa the arisa, but to put up thorns, to actually provide thorns, that's the arisa's job. I guess maybe it's not Maisa Omen, or else, like we said in the Mishnah, or that it's something extra. Klol, the also called ikar Bolma, the Balabayas. I don't think what's that word? Koloshem Bolma Nirvana Pirush Siyag. Every basic security or every basic fence is the Balabayas' responsibility. Tirusa Yeserta Darisa. But if he wants to add extra security, if he wants to add barbed wire on top of the fence, that's the Seicher.
So the chizra, the thorns are considered extra?
I guess it sounds like this is an explanation of what we just said.
Got it.
Once you have like the mounds and enough of a fence, putting thorns on top is like barbed wire. But Amar Yosef, Mara, v'zavila v'davla, this is very interesting to me. A shovel and a bucket and a hoe, or v'zarnuka, was the zarnuka, I think that's what you use for winnowing. The balabais. Balabais has to provide the basic implements for working the land. So see, an aris was like much more like a paid laborer. Maybe this guy owned a bunch of properties, and he would set everyone up with almost everything he needed, all the basics, to do it. And arisa ovid beyuari. If the aris decides that he doesn't want to schlep, we said also he has to provide the irrigation ditches. If the aris wants to not just use the ditches that go into the property, but he wants to extend them, make like little tributaries to get to each furrow, he has to do it himself. So he said just like the aris and the landowner divide the wine, the produce, at that whatever percentage, a quarter or a third, they also divide with the pruning, whatever they prune that could be used for firewood and the konim. So what does konim, what does sticks have to do with the vineyard? The smooth sticks that they would use to support the vines. They both have to provide the sticks. The reason why we're saying that they both provide it is to explain why they both get it at the end, because since they both provide it, they're allowed to take it equally. Okay, we're going to stop over here, and we'll continue tomorrow. But the truth is, it's like next. Okay, let's stop. Let's stop.